Correct. So we are all okay. So an important session today on the EU Joint Health Technology Assessment, a fit-for-purpose Joint Clinical Assessment, JCA. I'd like to say a few words before handing over to the different participants. The way we're going to do this is an initial introduction from each one, as well as their perspective, their angle on the discussion. And then we have a few topics that we'll go through around the joint HTA, the harmonized HTA, and the JCA. But I'll engage with the audience as well in terms of the discussion. I'm very happy to be chairing this session and be involved on this discussion. Quite a few years ago, together with namely Rui and others, we went through a process of bringing regulatory practice in Europe through an harmonization process and to a centralized, now well-developed, well-established process of assessing and approving and granting marketing authorization to these products across Europe. Europe, we do it together, not necessarily always an easy play together. There's multiple institutions, multiple perspectives. That diversity is a challenge, but also an opportunity to bring things together with different angles, different perspectives. It is important today, as it was then, to have the end in mind. Patients' needs, the benefit we're bringing to patients, and the opportunity of the patients that have a need, and there is an opportunity that we match the two, that the patients get access to it. That's what we want to do it. And for that, there is a short-term perspective in terms of providing that access, but also the long-term perspective in Europe to keep that machinery going, that development going, that competitiveness, that presence, that translational process from creation to patient access in existent and flexible. So we're going to discuss about that process of bringing the health technology assessment together in an harmonized perspective and the challenges and opportunities that it brings. We have a fantastic panel with Alessandro Aiuti, Loris Brunetta, Rui Ivo, Marco Marchetti, and Francis Pang. And I will, as I said, ask each one of them to tell us about themselves and their particular angle on this. And Rui made serious efforts to be here, but for multiple reasons beyond his control, he couldn't. So as benefit or punishment, I'll start with him and let him to introduce himself and give the first angle, and then we'll go through the other ones. So Rui, at a distance, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very pleased to be participating in this panel, and I regret not being able to be in Rome today. But as you said, that there were circumstances beyond my control that have not allowed me to be with you. Nevertheless, I hope we can have an interesting discussion. You asked me to present my perspective, and I will be perhaps brief at this introduction, as I would assume it's more a short introduction because this is how I see it. So I'm as the head of Portuguese Medicine Agency, where we have a joint responsibility of regulatory area and also the HTA, as you have mentioned. And what I see now with the implementation of HTA is that we have a great opportunity to look into how best continue working together at European level and to better serve the end purpose of our activities, which is to work for the patients. So help the access to medicinal products and also to improve equity across the EU. I think the implementation of this HTA regulation comes at a time where we had quite an important experience with working together in health terms, particularly when it comes to the combat that we had to face with the pandemics. So there is a great opportunity to use this context and to be able to set up this new system that aims at having a joint assessment for HTA purpose and subsequently at national level to help decisions in terms of pricing and reimbursement. So I see this as a great opportunity. I see this as a great possibility to benefit our citizens and also, of course, in overall terms, also to help the Europe in terms of being more innovative and being more competitive. So this is how I see where we are. But of course, this is a very challenging enterprise that we have in front of us, or that we are actually running. But of course, as you said, we have some good lessons from the past, not only the pandemics, but also the regulatory processes that have been evolving in the EU, and I believe this would be helping this process of having a common framework for HTA assessment in the EU. So back to you, Miguel. Thank you.
Thank you, Rui. Then I'll follow the same order here. Alessandro, shall I hand over to you?
Yes, I'm a physician scientist. I have the privilege to work at the Raffaele Telethon Institute for Gene Therapy in Milano, which is an institute devoted to develop treatment for rare genetic diseases. And so I've witnessed the preclinical development of few therapies that have been proven to be efficacious and safe in clinical trials. And eventually 2 of them became approved medicinal products in Europe, and another one recently both in Europe and US, thanks to partnership with industry. So my angle is certainly peculiar in the sense that I've seen therapies which eventually the cooperation with industry produce a result in terms of approval by regulatory authorities and approval of price and reimbursement, so medicine which are in the market. In one case, which was mentioned before by Francesca Pasinelli, General Manager of Fondazione Telethon, one of the therapies was no longer commercially viable, so it was going to be discontinued by Orchard Therapeutics, and the Telethon took back the license, as we've heard before. So now the effort of Fondazione Telethon is to become the first time a charity holding a marketing license in Europe with a treatment that is available in Milano at our center, where patients coming from Italy, from other European countries have access. So the price and reimbursement, which was approved relatively quick, 9 months after by the Italian Drug Agency, after the original EU central EMA approval. So the patients coming from other countries through the S2 route, the cross-border regulation, which allows treatment to be administered in Italy, even if the treatment is not approved in the different countries that are available to come. We have witnessed on the other side also slow process of price reimbursement for ATMPs, also in Europe, because some countries medicines are approved, in other not. I mean, I would say Italy is we're lucky because they've been quite thorough and fast evaluation. So in the end, I think I welcome certainly initiative to have centralized evaluation if this brings faster access of treatment of medicine to patients.
Thank you, Alessandro. Lawrence, from you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the invitation also. I'm a patient. I'm a patient advocate since many years now. I'm one of the founding members of the Thalassaemia International Federation. And as we have listened before, thalassaemia is one of the target diseases for the gene therapy. Also, Raffaele Tiget developed a gene therapy for thalassaemia some years ago. Preliminarily, I like to say that the purpose of any development in the framework of healthcare should consider the importance, that the duty of the public institution is to safeguard the right of any patient, of any European citizen, not a patient, citizen, to have the possibility to access to the best healthcare possible. And I think this is particularly important from the patient perspective, because usually we establish and we set our works as an international organization, having in mind this principle. Particularly when we are speaking about patients, people affected by rare or ultra-rare diseases, this kind of level of rights should be raised, because I think it's important for everyone not being left behind and be considered. Having said that, any consideration we can do about this new HTA regulation, any innovative legislation has some concerns, some opportunities to evaluate. And so, of course, some of the preliminary evaluations said about the HTA regulation group, and this, and the evidence needed for the approval of this, the advanced treatment of advanced therapies in general, are of concern of the patients. We are working, and we hope in an open dialogue with the institutions in order to express our views and concerns, hoping that they are got by the European institutions and consider in the light of the preliminary expression that any patient or any person at European level has the right to access the best treatment possible. We hope that this will be the future also of this regulation that is going to be implemented.
Marco.
Thanks also from my side for the invitation. I'm a public health, a physician by training. I have a public health background. Actually, I'm the director of the National Program for HTA for medical devices in Italy, and I co-chairing the HTA member state coordination group that is in charge for the implementation application of the HTA regulation. So I can bring you my perspective from inside of the coordination group. That is the objective to go into the direction that trying to harmonize practice in Europe, but with the objectives to improve the access to the patient for the patient to the real effective therapies, both on pharma and medical devices. This is the general objectives. So actually, we are in a European Union. That means we are 27 member states, but we have very different approach, at least in the past, to the HTA evaluation of health technologies. So what we are trying to do is to try to have a more unique approach at the European level. What are the potential advantages? That for sure the first one is to have just one point of contact for the HTA evaluation, at least for those dimensions that are considered. So we are talking about of relative effectiveness, we are talking about safety, we are not talking about of pricing and reimbursement that is strictly related to the context of different national care system. But for sure, I mean, what we are trying to do now at the European level, to have a unique approach to evaluate what is the effectiveness of this treatment. So this is our main goals. What are the advantages? Is to have a more clear rules, a more transparent process, and just one process to go into the health technology assessment. And then another, I mean, this is from my perspective, another value is that we are trying to create really an interconnected system at the European level. So we are working quite strictly with the European Medicine Agency, so trying to have some really parallel process in order to be ready to have, joint clinical assessment ready to go into the country just after the CHMP opinion. This is the main, what I can see the main advantage is trying to increase the level of the quality of the system. And this is interesting both the national authorities, but both also the HTA the HTA developers, because we are talking about looking to and increase the quality of the system. That means that from the perspective of the national authorities, we need to have a standardized approach, but also respect to the HTA developers need to, to look what could be the area of improvement in the clinical study evidence production. So it's not an easy job because we need to find a balance respect to different requirements, because we have different approach in different member states, but we are for sure, what we're going to have is not a perfect system in the future, but I think that will be able to bring a really added value in the coming years.
Thank you, Marco. Francis, do you want to?
Great. So thank you, Miguel, and also to ARM for the kind invitation to this panel. So I'm Francis Pang. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Market Access and International Geographic Expansion at Orchard Therapeutics, which is an ex vivo gene therapy company. And we have an approved therapy for metachromatic leukodystrophy in both US and Europe. And a lot of the initial research for the technology actually came from Professor Aiuti's institute. I have a background in health economics and genomic medicine, and also I'm fortunate enough to chair the EU Access and Value Recognition Group for ARM. Today I'll speak from the industry perspective, or the health technology developer perspective, as what's been termed in the various guidelines documents. I think first and foremost, I think there's a real opportunity to expedite patient access, right, through improving the efficiency and minimizing divergences in the interpretation of the same data set, right, across the EU member states, right, and that can only be good. However, for JCA to work, there really has to be some kind of appreciation for I guess some of the specifics and nuances related to evidence, right, in the different therapeutic areas, right? So you've got some therapeutic areas whereby you have very few comparators, and then other therapeutic areas where you've got many comparators, or the standard of care is evolving so rapidly, certainly in the oncology space, that, I think certainly for the JCA to work, it has to be able to have methods that account for that, or able to accommodate that. I think the processes also have to be timely. The turnaround time for companies to prepare submissions for the JCA is very, very short. And there are potentially numerous scenarios that could arise because of the comparators, the PICOs, which have been mentioned, I guess, in various sort of panel discussions. And I think what companies would like is some kind of sort of business predictability, right? So, and I think there is an aim in the future whereby if we don't have to think about the process, right, then the process is working, right? But I think right now there is a lot of thinking about or prediction about what's actually happening in terms of the JCA, and I think what companies would like is to be able to prepare in the best way possible, but also have that assurance of business predictability. So those are my kind of opening remarks, you know, to this particular sort of discussion today.
Thank you. I noticed from all the willingness to see a better patient access by a centralized process, accelerating it, making it more uniform. You also mentioned, Marcus, the clarifying the rules. All of that is definitely a good intention. Are we seeing that intention being translated? How do we feel about the growing pains? Laura said that every citizen has the right to have access. Do we see this as an opportunity for that right across Europe to be exercised faster and in a more uniform way because the process is centralized? Or are we concerned on some of the applications, which should they be only growing pains? In other words, there are things that we're going to resolve, or there are some more fundamental elements that could impact. And we see that also from alternative business models that are emerging, like the one from Telethon and Alessandro mentioning. Is that an opportunity reactive to a difficulty, or is that an opportunity that in itself was meant to be? I probably would like Alessandro to comment on that. I mean, how do you see the new business model and the challenge? I mean, your business model and the challenges of going through the HTA process for that being or not fit for that purpose?
Thank you. Yeah, it will be, I think, challenging as well. The principle of the idea of Telethon is to bring this therapy, to maintain the therapy, to bring new therapies when there is no commercial viable interest, when the therapy is not commercially viable. It is based on transparency of pricing, how the pricing will be made. Again, not in competition to industry, only when, hopefully in a few cases where industry will not bring this forward because it will not be sustainable. So it will not be based on actually R&D cost, because these costs are part of the mission of Telethon, which is to receive the donation that the people will do and to invest them in research. And also transparency in terms of how the money will be spent. It's unlikely there will be a profit. Actually, it's not possible that there will be a profit, but in case there will be the money will be spent, of course, investing in research again. So all this is very challenging, and it is a challenge for Telethon, because it's the first time that a charity brings this forward. So we hope that the dialogue with HTA will be based on this principle, which is accessibility and sustainability at the same time. We know that these treatments are expensive because the manufacturing is still expensive. We know that that there is an overall cost which needs to take in consideration the fact that a few patients, that these are some of them are once and done treatment, especially what we are aiming for ultra-rare diseases, not chronic treatment, but unique treatment, which are aimed to be curative, hopefully. So all these aspects need to be taken in consideration, while Telethon will work certainly to be transparent and to take in consideration to reduce the cost. It still has to take in consideration the fact that the system is not ready for this. Give you an example, the cost of the fees for the EMA or for regulatory agency are not automatically discounted for a not-for-profit. There are costs of infrastructure, pharmacovigilance, which cannot be distributed over 1,000 patients. They have to be distributed over few patients. So this, it's not always a slogan to say, okay, we can make a product with which is very low cost, because you have to think about this as a medicinal product. I'm not to tell you, to teach you this to this industry, but we have to take the whole overall picture. And in terms of speaking about ultra-rare diseases, touching briefly, high level, the issue of this, how the data can bring value to a treatment, I think we've seen for some of these medicinal products how single-arm trials with before and after control or with external controls have showed robustness of efficacy. And so this in relationship also to other treatment. Of course, this is something which needs to be looked case by case, but it's possible also to, in some cases, it's the only possibility to run single-arm trial when the randomization is not ethical, is not possible, is not feasible, that is not possible to do placebo-controlled trials because of the peculiarity of the disease and of the drug product. So I think these are all things which will be brought forward. I assume I'm not speaking for Telethon. I'm an investigator, but will be brought forward by Telethon Foundation for new applications with the aim to bring this therapy, access to this therapy with the most transparent and fair way.
Thanks, Alessandro. I think you've touched, if I'm correct, on two aspects. One is the need to support the development and find alternative opportunities in a non-profit context for certain products, and how the development costs and the consequent final cost of goods and implication comes to a product. But you also touched on the challenges that those products, because of the rarity of the small number of the patients and other aspects, in terms of fitting then the assessment afterwards in terms of getting through the process of HTA and JCA. Maybe I'll ask Francis to comment on this as well, on his perspective, and then go to the others. In a way, is the challenges of that implementation of HTA and a corresponding JCA in some more rare indications, and particularly on ATMP.
Thank you. So I think we all agree to sort of evidence-based sort of decision making, right? I mean, I think that is given. I just wanted to highlight that you know, there is no such thing as a perfect data set, and I guess, you know, when there is a health technology assessment, there are two aspects that need to be considered or of interest to HTA organizations, right? I think the first one is the relative treatment effect, and the second one is the duration or the durability of that particular sort of treatment effect. So, you know, I think certainly, you know, as what Professor Aiuti did mention, there are sometimes constraints when it comes to, you know, designing clinical studies, right? So if it's an ultra-rare disease or even a nano-rare disease, you may face difficulties in terms of recruitment. And also, if it's a very devastating disease, you may be left with just a sort of a single-arm sort of study design, you know, to practically to be able to you know, design and conduct the trial. There's always a trade-off, right, between the the evidence and, I guess, the cost and the practical side. Now, even before the submission goes to the regulatory authority, the data, there would have been a data cut which would have probably been about 12 months before the submission itself. So during the HTA process, beyond the regulatory process, you're talking about a dated data cut or an aged data cut, right? So what's important is that you have an assessment with the most recent or best available evidence, right? So a more recent data cut. So there has to be some kind of ability or capacity to accommodate the latest evidence base, right? The latest data cut. And whether that's published or not published, I think it's still very useful data to, for the decision problem at hand, right? So I think here you need to have a kind of a pragmatic, perspective when it comes to perhaps in certain instances, single-arm studies comprise most of the data set for that particular asset, right? Whereas in other disease areas, you may have lots of randomized controlled trials, and then the emphasis might be on the synthesis of all the trials, right, to come up with an assessment of the treatment effect, right? So I think not one size fits all. I think that there are sort of certainly nuances, when it comes to data. And I think the other aspect is beyond the JCA, what is required by the HTA authority at the national level beyond the data that's being used for the JCA. And some of that data feeds into cost effectiveness, health economic modeling, and other countries don't have that. So there are differing requirements when it comes to the value judgment aspect as well. So.
Thank you, Francis. And before we go to that kind of central to member state step, let's just focus a little bit more on the HTA assessment. So the analysis of evidence on a risk-benefit analysis gets the product to get a marketing authorization. Then the HTA is a step where we say, okay, how is this value perceived? How is this going to bring value to patients? I mean, now that is safe and effective to be on the market, how do we see the value? And there's a certain comparative element, which obviously it's easier if you have data. It's comparative data. It's more challenging if you have to make a judgment on the standalone data because of practical, ethical, or other aspects. This requires something that you've mentioned, which is a pragmatic approach. In other words, and again, even before we see how do we implement that, can we see how pragmatic are we going to be, or the assessment is going to be, considering all of this. In the end, it's a decision or an assessment in saying, we perceive this value to be X for being brought to the patient, and I think we would want to understand how pragmatic that is going to be. And this is important because there's been issuing of some guidance recently on how those methods and those approaches should be. So, Mark, could you comment on how pragmatic do you think, how fit for purpose do you think this will be?
Pragmatic should be to be realistic in the sense that we are, I think, all aware that something is possible, something else is not possible. So it means that, the guidance that you mentioned before are guidance that are really open guidance because are directed not just to ATMP, but are directed both on medical devices, both on pharma product, oncologic and other kind of product. So it means that in this guidance there is some general rules that for sure are, highlighting that comparative data are better than not comparative data and so on. But for sure, if we have to talk with a specific focus on ATMP, pragmatic should be look to the reality of the ATMP, so that considering that in some situation we can probably have some comparative data, in other one we are not able to have some comparative data. But would you like to, to go into in your consideration when you say that? Your consideration with respect to the update, so the latest update of the data. So if you go through the first implementing act on joint clinical assessment, it's foreseen that it could be, an update of the data in case that the manufacturer have to, have some news to communicate. So I would like again to highlight that we are looking to an increasing level of the quality of the system. It means that, you have, as a HTD developer, also to, if I can say, let me say, better prepared to the submission. So this is better plan respect to the past. And in this perspective, would you like also to consider another element that is included into the regulation? So the possibility to have a scientific advice before, so that this is probably the way in which you can anticipate what will be requested by the HTD, by the HTA bodies, both at the European level and both at the national level. Then finally, would you like to distinguish what you call value? That is something that is related to the context. So I'm going to assess the value with respect to a specific context. And what is what I mentioned at the beginning, the relative effectiveness. This is another point, another perspective. So the HTA regulation have the focus on the data, on the evidence. That means I'm going to identify what is the increasing effectiveness with respect to the standard of care that is available, and not giving a value judgment at the European level. This is something that is on top of the member state, the national responsibility, because this is connected with the pricing and reimbursement. So we are talking about on evidence. So this is the real focus on the regulation.
Loris, do you want to make any comments on this?
Yes, I think the patient community, of course, welcomes all the legislation, the HTA regulation, but also the pharma legislation that goes in the direction, hopefully, to facilitate the access of the patient, the development of drugs for rare and ultra-rare diseases, and also providing incentives to the academia in order to perform what is not commercially so interesting for the companies, maybe. So also the HTA regulation and the implementing acts are very important for us, because it is an effort to streamline at the EU level all the process of approval of drugs. That is something that is particularly important for rare and ultra-rare diseases, as said before, and thalassaemia and hemoglobinopathies and sickle cell that has been cited before are amongst this kind of diseases. Of course, according to what the HTA coordination group said about the evaluation of the evidence needed for the evaluation for a correct evaluation process, it's a concern for us, because as already said, it's not always feasible to have randomized clinical trial, particularly in rare diseases or ultra rare, and particularly when the use of ATMPs that is very costly, it's very expensive, and it's difficult to think to perform to have a control arm is something that it's quite difficult. Of course, I'm confident that also the HTA will follow the line that has been proposed by the European Commission to facilitate the access. So this means not to hamper the development of the products that are life-changing for many patients, particularly the ATMPs, of course. I think this is a general consideration, and everybody can agree that randomized clinical trials are a good opportunity for regulators. I've been a member of the Committee for Orphan Drugs for 3 years, and I know very well how much is important for the regulators to see comparative data. But sometimes it's not possible, and we as in the Committee for Orphan Drugs, we have approved ATMPs based on single-arm data. Of course, it's something that is important for the patients to have this kind of approval. Having said this, I hope this is a general consideration, but also that there is an open dialogue with the institution in order to promote also the view of the patients and the expectations and meet the expectations of the patients. There are a lot of diseases that are without any treatment options, with high unmet medical needs. And we need to have in mind this kind of people, this kind of patients that are waiting since many, many years to have a treatment options to improve their lives.
Thank you, Lawrence. I resonate well to what was said, which is this is a question of evidence, and this is also a question of evidence in relation to an unmet medical need. And that's that dual aspect that comes into question. And then I'll go to Rui and say, could you make a couple of comments, or one is any additional thing that you may wish to add to this suitability of the process to some of the exceptions and some of the more challenging approaches in products? How is that evidence being assessed? And very importantly, how is that going to be then followed and used to the next step, which is how are member states going to then make use and make the decisions that is within their remit for the next for the next steps? Because what we all want is a good, solid, evidence-based process that I believe should be pragmatic to the opportunities, that enables to address unmet medical needs, and that can only happen when the patients are treated at the member state level. So, read comments on the process and the transposition of that to member states?
Yes, thank you, Miguel. Perhaps just allow me to make a reinforcement on the importance of evidence. As you probably know, and Marco has mentioned it very clearly, but also in terms of supporting the process of implementing the EU joint health emergency assessment of the entire regulation, also the heads of the they have set up a working group to work closely with the other strikers in order to help the process to be implemented. Because it's very important that the agencies that at the end of the day will be providing both the capacity to do the assessment, but also at the end of the day, as you asked, also to support the implementation are closely associated, not only the committee, the coordination group, but also heads themselves. And in this relation, I would like to also to call a statement that we have issued recently on the 31st of January, where we really point out that the evidence is really key in this process, and is key in many aspects. I can mention not only for ensuring the quality of the assessment, but also to help the coordination or the cooperation between the two elements of the system. So on the regulatory side and also HTA side, and Marco also mentioned the joint scientific consultations, and here this would be very important that they are done in parallel, regulatory and HTA. So I'm reinforcing this element because, of course, here we have to ensure this quality, ensure this high level of evidence, but of course also I'm very conscious, and there were some figures that appeared today or these days on the access to ATMPs, that the system also has flexibility and that the guidance, but as Marcos also said, the guidance is open to try to allow the different elements that are available to do the assessment. But so very important that this assessment is of high quality. There won't be a relative judgment, but there will be a very good analysis that will be then used by the member states. And I'm sure that if this quality, this strength is ensured, I'm sure that this will be then used at the member states level. Again, here we have to follow this process. The situations are different in the member states, but I think we share very clearly two objectives. One is to ensure access, that I mentioned already before, and of course also in many cases, like the case of my country, where we use this for pricing and reimbursement, so the sustainability aspect is also very important. So I think if we support that in this direction, I think we'll be able to bring the benefit to the patients. But as we know from experience, we all now need to work closely together so that we are not duplicating unnecessary activities and are, of course, ensuring that there is a complementarity in what will be done at European level and what will follow at national level, depending on the exact way of the operation of the different health systems. I hope I managed to contribute to your question, Miguel. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Roy. Maybe at this point, I would like to see if there's any question from the audience. Do we have a mic?
Speak into the box.
It's a box.
Okay, and throw it away. Okay.
No.
Kind of an interesting topic in trying to figure out what is a sensible outcome. If you look at two words, constraints and limitations, as you're working through this HTA issue, and you have a value that you're trying to create by a process. If you look at what did not happen during COVID, about trying to get a number of countries and even parts of countries to agree on a certain process, I mean, is there a way forward without some type of a directed outcome as to how you assess something on its value for a person or for a number of people? Because you're still looking at a process by which somebody is going to be told no. And that's what nobody wants to do. No one wants to say either to the innovator, nobody wants to say no to the patient. So I'm really struggling as to, I've heard all of these issues and all these limitations, constraints you have about trying to drive through what is a fair process to assess value to the patient. But is this something that we're going to do it in our lifetime?
I don't know who wants to take a bite at the question. I think it's also, I would say that if there is a will, there is a way, right? If you want to make it happen, it will happen. And I think the key players on this process want it to happen, but they may want it to happen in slightly different perspectives, but all with the same objective for the benefit of the patient. I don't know, maybe I'll get Marco to start on if do you have any comments to what was said?
It's quite not difficult to give an answer to that, to this. I mean, for sure, I mean, we are building a new process that is quite new for Europe. So, and it's quite unique because it's the first. I mean, is the first, at least in my knowledge, experience all over the world, in which you have 27 member states with $500 million of, citizens that are interested. So for sure, I can say that we are completely aware that we need to go into the patient value, what is also the expectation of the patient and in particular for the ATMP, what are the, what are considered the more important improvement for the quality of life of patient. So we are completely aware. We are. This is what I probably can understand as a pragmatic approach to this.
Alessandro, yeah?
Well, I think it would make perfect sense to have, especially for ultra-rare diseases, a centralized pricing and negotiation, given that the population of patients is very few, very limited, given the fact that there is only few centers in Europe which will administer the treatment, and manufacturing may be also very limited. So certainly this is a very specific patient population, which would be, however, really have the better access to a treatment once approved if there is this centralized effort. It's something which is, I guess, it's very difficult to achieve. It has been proposed also by RORDIS, by Patients Association, by Telethon Foundation, as one of the ways to overcome some of the bottlenecks. But it's something. It's a change of mentality. Is a disruptive change. So.
Before we conclude, and then come to a final statement, I would like just to make a quick loop, which is a good process, a centralized process, a speedy process that enables that assessment, and I resonate, Marco, to all of that, should also foster the translation. In other words, we should see more of the academia translating into products and an investment in product and products going all the way to address patient needs. Do we have expectations on this, on concerns on this? Francis, do you want to make any comment on that, i.e. the competitiveness of the environment in Europe? And then to have Marco, potential Rui, to comment on that just before we close the loop.
Sure. I think this is certainly an opportunity to have, to have the JCA, but I think certainly the methods and the process, if they become so cumbersome and lead to perhaps negative decisions on price and reimbursement downstream, then I think there is certainly a danger in terms of the EU slipping down the launch sequence order, right? I think certainly companies they look at US, they look at EU, look at Japan, but if it becomes so cumbersome, it could be certainly quite disincentivizing, right? And it could have an impact on innovation. Hopefully we won't get there, right? I mean, it's just a few things to sort of bear in mind, and I think it just does come down to perhaps continuous improvement as well. In that it's unlikely that you can have a process that is going to be completely perfect at the outset, right? There's going to be a need for continuous improvement over time, and actually having that willingness to listen to the feedback of the users of that, which is the health technology developers, over time, and then having updates is really, really important. And NICE, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, I was on their committee for 10 years, and they took 20 years to get their process right. And then, rare disease process that they had took 10 years to get right as well. So there has to be that element of continuous improvement, and I guess that's what we're kind of asking for as well.
Yeah, no, I resonate to that. It's not just the short term, but the long term and the sustainability of the system. We're close to the end. I would like to ask each one of you in a very short sentence saying, okay, with a patient in mind, because after all, that's really what drives us all, what would be the take-home message to the audience? And again, I'll start with Rui, if that's okay with you at a distance.
Yes, thank you, Miguel. Yes, with the patient in mind, I think with this new system, we will certainly improve the benefits for the patient. I think there will be also synergies between the regulatory system and the HTA, and this will also have a positive contribution. So I am a firm believer in the benefits of the EU cooperation, and I believe that we will be able together to build up the system, but being sure that we have to continuously look at it. So with this in mind, I think we will be able to have a further step towards better access and working for our citizens.
Thanks. Alessandro?
Yes, I think we have seen the development of transformative therapies thanks to brilliant inventions, which are now tackling disease in a way that was not imaginable a few years ago. So I think that the regulatory system evolved to adapt to these completely new innovative therapies, ATMPs, editing, and all this. And so I think that the system needs probably a change of path and adaptation also to this. And so I think that we really hope that this new assessment and the cooperation between regulators, HTAs, patients associations, and developers would really improve the access to these therapies, because there is a strong unmet medical need, and really need to have a change of mind and the ability to adapt also to this framework, which is continuously evolving. And I think also the HTA evaluation needs to take in consideration the peculiarity of ATMPs and the disease that we're tackling.
Thank you. Very briefly, Francis, to...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important. I mean, I think that it all stems from, I guess, the scoping process, right? And then I think, when you're defining the scope, for the assessment, having the multi-stakeholder engagement, right, the clinicians, the company, and also the patients as well, involved at that meeting, because I think, all the work downstream all stems from that. So that's the call to action for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Francis. Marco, and I know we're a bit tight on time. Sorry for that, Marco.
No, I mean, I can just highlight again that having patient in mind, I mean, we have the same objective. I mean, to bring faster and faster real efficacy, really effective treatment available for patients. What you're trying to do is to look to a long-term sustainability for the system in Europe that is completely different, at least from the United States. I mean, where the healthcare funds is completely different. And what we are changing is that we are trying to adapt also the regulatory, because we are not talking about really, I mean, the classic regulatory approach. We are talking about an assessment that is quite close to the pricing and reimbursement for the system. We are trying to increase the level and the harmonization of this approach at the European level. So, but this because we have, I mean, up to now, differences with respect to patients that are in different member states. And we have different experience, we have faster access in some country, and I mean, we have no access in other countries. So the final objective is to increase the average of the quality and to foster the access in each member state.
And Loris, I mean, representing
Having
the
the patient in mind,
yes.
I of course have
I
the
left it for
patient
the end.
in mind. And I think when I was born 61 years ago, thalassaemia was the lifespan of a patient with thalassaemia was late infancy or at best adolescence. So we have been waiting for advancements, achievements in the field of science since we were born. So at the end of the day, I think that now we are in a time where the patients are considered differently from the paternalistic medicine of many years ago, and now the patient, I'm sitting here for discussing in this high-level meeting, and it's important for the patient's view to be included in the process of the evaluation of any drugs that are for us, of course. The drugs, the pharma industries exist because there are the patients. So as told before, we have seen the gene therapy because any aspiration of any patient in the world is to be cured at the end of the day. So we have been waiting this miracle treatment since more than 40 years now. And now that this miracle is a reality, please make all together an effort in order that this not become a privilege for some instead of a right for everyone of patients.
Thank you very much to the panel at the distance and here. Sorry that it took a little bit longer, particularly for you, Marco. You wanted to leave, but I think we've covered good ground, and applause to the speakers. Thank you.